Group 11, Brianna, Lizette, and Kaylee. In the novel East of Eden, John Steinbeck develops his characters through the idea of good and evil.
Steinbeck dedicates a whole chapter to a specific piece of text in order to create a strong emphasis on his perspective of humans. This piece is full of rhetorical questions that he asks his readers, such as, what is the world story about? What way will the world go? How does it end? While we're at it, what's the story about? Then he goes on to add to his theme of good and evil by stating the things that humans are caught in. He names a few, being their lives, their thoughts, their hungers and ambitions, their avarice and cruelty, and their kindness and generosity. Steinbeck also uses the rhetorical device of alliteration and says, virtue, vice, warp, and woof. Then he finishes this section with another rhetorical question tying into the theme of good and evil. He states, was it good or was it evil? Have I done well or ill? He does this in order to make the audience think about the general theme. Steinbeck goes on with his use of rhetorical questions. He names some such as, who is the luckiest person in the world? Do you not consider me lucky? How can I tell? Then he goes on with the use of complex sentences to explain a dead man's value. He states, if he has had wealth and influence and power and all the vestments that arouse envy, and after the living take stock of the dead man's property and his eminence and works and monuments, the question is still there. Was his life good or was it evil? Was he loved or was he hated? Is his death felt as a loss or does a kind of joy come on it? Steinbeck presents the topic of a dead man's value in order to demonstrate the effect that his death will bring, based on his value as a human. In order to make his point of a dead man's value, he uses 3 deaths as an example. The 3 deaths have a contrast between the 3 men and their values. The first man was described as the richest man of the century who spent many years trying to buy back the love he had forfeited and by that process performed great service to the world and perhaps had much more than balanced the evils of the rest. His death was received with pleasure. The other man, which Steinbeck describes with a simile, smart as Satan, was known to lack some perception of human dignity and knowing all too well very aspect of a human weakness and wickedness, using his special knowledge to warp men, to buy them, to bribe and threaten and seduce until he found himself in a sensation of great power. His death caused praise and gladness that he was dead. Steinbeck goes on to express the third death. He states that the third man's life was devoted to making men brave and dignified and good in a time when they were poor and frightened and when ugly forces were loose in the world to utilize their fears. His death caused many people to burst into tears. They asked themselves, what can we do now? How can we go on without him? At the end of the chapter, Steinbeck presents his main idea. He states that men want to be good and want to be loved. Indeed, most of their vices are attempted shortcuts to love. When a man comes to die, no matter what his talents and influence and genius, if he dies unloved, his life must be a failure to him and his dying a cold horror. His main idea is to be a good person so your death can mourn people instead of pleasure, which can be known as another theme in East of Eden. Throughout the whole small chapter, Steinbeck's main idea goes back to adding another theme of being a good person so your death can cause mourn instead of pleasure.